On January 26, 2020, a small headline from a famous media outlet sent shockwaves worldwide when it announced that Kobe Bryant's helicopter had met an accident within a few minutes. The whole world mourned the sudden and tragic loss of basketball legend Kobe Bryant. The former Los Angeles Lakers star, who spent his entire 20-season NBA career with the team, died in a helicopter crash in Calabasas, California. The shocking incident not only took the life of Bryant, but also claimed the lives of his 13-year-old daughter, Gianna, and 7 others. This is the story of a tragic event that led to a horrific accident that changed the lives of Kobe Bryant and his family forever. On a cold gray Sunday morning in the winter of 2020, ARA Zabayan, a veteran helicopter pilot stood in the Atlantic Aviation Terminal at John Wayne International Airport in Orange County, California. He looked at his flight planning app and the news was not good. The app showed a blanket of clouds covering the city with a patchy haze. This meant that large parts of the region were not suitable for flying. Zabayan, an experienced pilot, ignored his training, violated flight rules by flying into conditions where he couldn't see, and failed to take alternate measures, such as slowing down and landing or switching to autopilot, that would have averted the tragedy. This is a big problem for a helicopter pilot. Like him, Zabayan's employer OC Helicopters had contracted their services to fly NBA superstar Kobe Bryant and 7 of his companions to Camarillo, a coastal airport located 80 miles to the northwest, for Zabayan, the helicopter pilot. Kobe Bryant's car arrived a little late, along with a group of travelers from the Mamba Sports Academy. Bryant had recently retired from the NBA and took a special interest in his 13-year-old daughter, Gianna's athletic development. He had formed Team Mamba with himself as a coach and recruited a team of girls from Orange County to play. With Gianna accompanying her were Peyton Chester and her mother, Sarah Chester, as well as Alyssa Altobelli, with her parents, Carrie and John Altobelli. The team was also accompanied by Bryant's assistant coach, Christina Mauser, whom Bryant had met through Gianna's private school at Corona del Mar. They were all heading to Thousand Oaks for a travel league and basketball tournament. The night before, Bryant's personal assistant had called OC Helicopters to reschedule the departure time from 9:45 a.m. to 9 a.m. so that Bryant could check out earlier. In the morning, the group was dressed in identical black tracksuits, featuring a Nike swoosh and the Mamba Sports Academy logo in white. Team Mamba was ready for takeoff. At 9:44 a.m., about 2 minutes before the accident, while the helicopter was flying west at an altitude of about 1,370 ft over U.S. Route 101 and rising terrain, the pilot announced to an air traffic control facility that he was initiating a climb to get the helicopter above the cloud layers, and the helicopter immediately began climbing at a rate of about 1,500 mph per minute. At about the same time, the helicopter began a gradual left turn, and its flight path generally continued to follow US 101 below. About 36 seconds later, while still climbing, the helicopter began to turn more tightly to the left, and its flight path diverged from its overflight of US 101. The helicopter reached an altitude of about 2,270 feet at 9:45, then began to descend rapidly in a left turn to the ground. While the helicopter was descending, the air traffic controller asked the pilot to say intentions, and the pilot replied that the flight was climbing to 4,000 ft. A witness near the accident site first heard the helicopter, then saw it emerge from the bottom of the cloud layer in a left-banked descent about 1 or 2 seconds before impact. The pilot completed a flight risk analysis form about 2 hours before the accident flight's departure. Based on the form's risk scoring criteria, the pilot's score for the accident flight was within the company's low-risk category. Updated weather information available at the time the accident flight departed included conditions that met the criteria for the form's risk, items that would have required the pilot to seek input from the Director of Operations and to provide an alternative plan. However, company guidance was unclear as to whether the accident pilot was expected to complete an updated form, and he did not do this. At the time, the pilot took action to initiate a climb. The helicopter had already begun penetrating clouds. Although the pilot's adverse weather avoidance training emphasized avoiding entry into instrument, meteorological conditions by slowing the helicopter and maneuvering or landing, there was no evidence that he attempted to do so. As the helicopter climbed rapidly into the cloud layer and into instrument meteorological conditions, while in a gradual left turn, the pilot's associated loss of outside visual references made him susceptible to experiencing vestibular illusions, in which the vestibular system in the inner ear produces a false sense of helicopter attitude and trajectory that can lead to spatial disorientation. The pilot's continuation of the accident flight into instrument meteorological conditions was inconsistent with his typical judgment and decision-making behavior and was likely influenced by his self-induced pressure, lack of an alternate plan, and plan continuation bias. Flight simulation devices can present pilots with representations of deteriorating weather conditions that cannot be realistically duplicated during flight training conducted in helicopters in visual meteorological conditions. The use of simulation devices during scenario-based helicopter pilot training has the potential to improve pilots' abilities to accurately assess weather and make appropriate weather-related decisions. Flight data monitoring involves the recording and analysis of flight-related information to help pilots, instructors, or operators improve performance and safety. A flight data monitoring program, which can be integrated into an SMS, has the potential to provide important information regarding pilot performance during flights, which may be particularly beneficial for operators like Island Express that conduct single-pilot operations and, thus, have little opportunity to directly observe their pilots in the operational environment. The Sikorsky S-76B helicopter was flying at about 184 miles and descending at a rate of more than 4,000 feet, 1,219 meters, when it slammed into the hillside and ignited, scattering debris over an area the size of a football field. The victims died immediately. Bryant, his 13-year-old daughter Gianna, and 6 others who left Orange County that morning were headed to his Mamba Sports Academy in Ventura County. The group had flown to the same destination the previous day, and Zobayan had flown Bryant along that route at least 10 times in 2019. Certain circumstances of this accident could not be conclusively determined, including the visual cues associated with the adverse weather and the pilot's focus of attention in the cockpit following the flight's penetration of clouds and entry into instrument meteorological conditions. A crash-resistant flight recorder system capable of capturing audio and images could have provided this valuable information, possibly enabling the identification of additional safety issues and the development of safety recommendations to prevent similar accidents. The National Transportation Safety Board launched a GO team consisting of an investigator in charge from the Major Investigations Division and specialists in operations, human performance, airworthiness, power plants, aerial imagery, air traffic control, meteorology, maintenance records, and site control. National Transportation Safety Board final report detects that none of the following safety issues were identified for the accident flight: pilot qualification deficiencies or impairment due to medical condition, alcohol, other drugs, or fatigue, helicopter malfunction or failure, or pressure on the pilot from Island Express, Helicopters, Inc., the air charter broker, or the client to complete the flight, although the air traffic controller's failure to report The loss of radar contact and radio communication with the accident flight was inconsistent with air traffic control procedures. This deficiency did not contribute to the accident or affect its survivability. Had the pilot completed an updated flight risk analysis form for the accident flight that considered the weather information available at the time the flight departed, the flight would have remained within the company's low-risk category, but would have required the pilot to seek input from the director of operations and to provide an alternative plan. At the time that the pilot took action to initiate a climb, the helicopter had already begun penetrating clouds, and the pilot had lost visual reference to the horizon and the ground. The loss of outside visual reference was possibly intermittent at first, but likely complete. By the time the flight began to enter the left turn that diverged from its route over U.S. Route 101, the pilot's poor decision to fly at an excessive airspeed for the weather conditions was inconsistent with his adverse weather avoidance training and reduced the time available for him to choose an alternative course of action to avoid entering instrument meteorological conditions. The pilot experienced spatial disorientation while climbing the helicopter in instrument meteorological conditions, which led to his loss of helicopter control and the resulting collision with terrain. The pilot's decision to continue the flight into deteriorating weather conditions was likely influenced by his self-induced pressure to fulfill the client's travel needs, his lack of an alternative plan, and his plan continuation bias, which strengthened as the flight neared the destination. Island Express. Helicopters Inc.'s lack of a documented policy and safety assurance evaluations to ensure that its pilots were consistently and correctly completing the flight risk analysis forms hindered the effectiveness of the form as a risk management tool. A fully implemented mandatory safety management system could enhance Island Express Helicopters Inc.'s ability to manage risks. The use of appropriate simulation devices in scenario-based helicopter pilot training has the potential to improve pilots' abilities to accurately assess weather and make appropriate weather-related decisions. Objective research to evaluate spatial disorientation simulation technologies may help determine which applications are most effective for training pilots to recognize the onset of spatial disorientation and successfully mitigate it. A flight data monitoring program, which can enable an operator to identify and mitigate factors that may influence deviations from established norms and procedures, can be particularly beneficial for operators like Island Express Helicopters Inc., that conduct single-pilot operations and have little opportunity to directly observe their pilots in the operational environment. A crash-resistant flight recorder system that records parametric data and cockpit audio and images with a view of the cockpit environment. To include as much of the outside view as possible could have provided valuable information about the visual cues associated with the adverse weather and the pilot's focus of attention in the cockpit following the flight's entry into instrument meteorological conditions. The National Transportation Safety Board determines that the probable cause of this accident was the pilot's decision to continue flight under visual flight rules into instrument meteorological conditions, which resulted in the pilot's spatial disorientation and loss of control. Contributing to the accident was the pilot's likely self-induced pressure, the pilot's plan continuation bias, which adversely affected his decision-making, and Island Express Helicopters Inc.'s inadequate review and oversight of its safety management processes. The pilot doesn't know which way is up. Federal lawmakers have sponsored the Kobe Bryant and Gianna Bryant Helicopter Safety Act to mandate warning systems on all helicopters carrying 6 or more passengers. The National Transportation Safety Board report is likely to factor into litigation in the case, whether it's admissible in court or not, said Dallas lawyer Michael Lyons. The crash generated lawsuits and countersuits, with Bryant's widow suing Island Express and the pilot for wrongful death on the day a massive public memorial was held almost a year ago at Staples Center, where the Lakers All-Star played most of his career. Vanessa Bryant said Island Express Helicopters, Inc., which operated the aircraft, and its owner, Island Express Holding Corp., did not properly train or supervise Zobayan. She said the pilot was careless and negligent to fly in fog and should have aborted the flight. Zobayan's brother, Berge Zobayan, has said Kobe Bryant knew the risks of flying in a helicopter and that his survivors aren't entitled to damages from the pilot's estate. Island Express Helicopters, Inc. denied responsibility and said the crash was an act of God that it could not control. Lawyers for Berge, Zobayan, and Island Express said they had no comment on the National Transportation Safety Board findings. Families of other victims sued the helicopter companies, but not the pilot. The others killed in the crash were Orange Coast College baseball coach John Altobelli, his wife Carrie, and their daughter Alyssa. Christina Mauser, who helped Bryant coach his daughter's basketball team, and Sarah Chester and her daughter Peyton. Alyssa and Peyton were Gianna's teammates. The companies have countersued 2 FAA air traffic controllers, saying the crash was caused by their series of erroneous acts and omissions. While air traffic controllers failed to report the loss of radar contact and radar communication with the flight, which was inconsistent with their procedures, it did not contribute to the crash. Unfortunately, within 10 minutes, firefighters arrived at the crash site and realized there were no more lives to be saved. 12:05 a.m. tragically news broke out that NBA superstar Kobe Bryant and his daughter Gianna had died in a terrible helicopter crash. Social media speculation and false reports ran rampant until a small media outlet ultimately confirmed the heartbreaking details. The crash, which also claimed the lives of 7 other passengers, had been the subject of intense scrutiny for Bryant's widow, Vanessa. This tragedy was all the more unbearable because it could have been prevented, as the final investigation suggested. She, along with the families of the other victims, has filed a wrongful death lawsuit against helicopter company Island. It is hard to come to terms with the fact that such a tragedy could have been avoided. Yet here we are. We can only hope that justice is served and that the families of the victims find some solace in the wake of this devastating loss. The death of Kobe Bryant has been met with shock and sadness from people around the world, including U.S. President Donald Trump, Oscar-winning actress Reese Witherspoon, NBA Hall of Famers Bill Russell and Larry Bird, Reverend Jesse Jackson, Disney CEO, Robert Iger, rapper, Wycliffe Jean, former NFL player. Keyshawn Johnson and FC Barcelona Football Club expressed their grief and admiration for Bryant's legacy as an athlete, mentor, and creative genius. After the accident, a detailed investigation was launched into the whole drama. It was found that the helicopter crash that killed Kobe Bryant and 8 other people in Southern California was most likely caused by the pilot's decision to fly into clouds in violation of federal rules, blinding him to his surroundings and causing him to lose control of the helicopter. Had he decided not to take off owing to abject weather conditions or engage the autopilot at the right time instead of maneuvering the helicopter by hand, that fateful day would have taken a different turn. Thanks for watching this story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on your notification bell to stay updated on more similar videos. We would love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share your comments below. Until next time.